My name is Bruce Alexander. I was a psych prof at SFU for 35 years, and my main interest is the psychology of addiction, but in a very large sense. So, for example, I'm very interested in the war on drugs and everything that's happened in Vancouver over the last 50 years. We have treated addiction medically for about 150 years, and we have tried every possible kind of treatment, and many of these treatments have been highly touted when they first appear, and people have made very extreme claims about how successful they are. Now, this is true if we go back into the 1800s, it's true all through the 1900s, and it's true in our century as well. People are still making extreme claims for medical forms of treatment. Some medical forms of treatment work pretty well. That is, they help some people. And in fact, pretty well all medical forms of treatment which have survived for a while do help somebody, but none of them are extremely effective. I've traveled a lot in the north of British Columbia and Alberta. I've been to a lot of reserves. I've seen a lot of people doing traditional healing. What has been most educational for me is visiting traditional healers in various native reserves, because these are smart people and they're doing something which makes an awful lot of sense. That is, they're using the power of the community to try to draw people back in who have been lost or who have been violent or who have sort of lost their standing. Traditional healing methods all have to do with drawing people back in. Sometimes they involve traditional rituals like sweats and so forth. Other times it's just a matter of bringing people together who have hurt each other and need to sit down and talk together as members of the same community. I think traditional healing methods have to be indigenous. They have to come from the people, from the real community, and that's what gives them their strength. The history of indigenous medicine is that, of course, the indigenous peoples had all kinds of medical practices that were here before they were colonized, and these worked reasonably well, but they were discredited when Western medicine came, because of course Western medicine had advanced techniques that superseded many of the traditional practices. The problem is that Western medicine can't handle addiction any better than traditional medicine, and so now I think we're seeing a resurgence of that part of traditional medicine which has to do with psychology and problems of the soul, and I think it's a welcome thing, because we're learning about Western medicine that whereas it can cure all kinds of things wonderfully well, it really can't touch drug use and drug addiction in any way any better than traditional practices can. So I'm hoping we will be shifting to traditional practices not only in native contexts, but also in other contexts as well. And we are, in fact, we're shifting into, for example, Eastern traditions and acupuncture traditions and all of these other traditions, simply because Western medicine, for all its wonderful virtues, doesn't handle drug use and addiction very well at all. What we now know is that addiction is not caused by drugs modifying the brain, but addiction is caused by a whole range of other problems, I should say. Not just addiction, but a whole range of other problems are caused ultimately by dislocation, that is, people being separated from their culture and from their customary community ways of doing things. The ultimate solution to drug problems and problems of depression and problems of other kinds of mental illness and anxiety, the solution to this ultimately will have to be a cultural problem. Really, the culture has to change. And that's why even the traditional methods, which work at least as well as the medical methods, even they don't work as well as we want them to. And ultimately we have to talk about social change if we're going to talk about restoring ourselves to a healthy condition. So I met a grandmother who was a drug counselor, and she sat me down by the side of the river, a great frothing northern river, and she told me what drug counselors do. She said, we see somebody out there in the froth, and we swim to them with all our strength, and we know where to swim because the elders have told us where the rocks are under the water. So So we avoid the rocks, we grab the person, with all our strength we drag them back to the shore and fling them up on the bank, and sometimes they rise and walk back into the land and into the people, and sometimes they fall off the bank and are lost. But she said, this work is so important, it makes us feel that we are warriors, we are saving human beings, until we realize that some son of a bitch upstream keeps throwing more people in the water this year than last year, and that we may be losing ground. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that story, and I think the real question is to identify that son of a bitch upstream and to figure out what we can do about him. I think traditional healing methods go part of the way. I'm hoping we can go even further.
Our θəytət, ʔəwə. We must build a healing place. Our θəytət, ʔəwə.